Hello everyone, welcome back to this next skills development session for our ITT mentoring at ARU. I'm still Jenny Fogarty, Director of Initial Teacher Training, but today we're going to be thinking about three key skills for the mentor to have: modelling, scaffolding and deliberate practice. So let's get started. So let's start by defining our key terms. We start with the idea of modelling, something that should be very familiar to you as experienced teachers. It's an instructional strategy in which the teacher demonstrates a new concept or approach to learning and students learn by observing. In our case, the students are our trainees. It's very simple. We need to show them what we want them or need them to do. If you don't show them it, they can't do it themselves. This observation is really important and we call that modelling. Moving on, let's think about scaffolding, the breaking down of information or of parts of new skill into pieces that are digestible for the learner. This is based on the work of Vygotsky and developed by Bruner in the 60s. So this idea that social constructivism needs to be broken down in order for students or learners to move through their zone of proximal development. Often we've internalized this to mean scaffolding is the support that's put in, probably due to the assumptions we make around the words, but actually it's the breaking down, it's the steps. So if you think of scaffolding as the points on the scaffold that move you up to the next level, rather than the supports of the scaffold themselves, that might help you here. Let's move on to this idea of deliberate practice, which is very in vogue at the moment when we think about the ITT ECF and how modern ITT practitioners work. But it's actually got quite old and well-researched groundings that underpin it. So it's a highly structured activity, according to Erickson et al., in a very pivotal piece that I've referenced for you at the end, where the explicit goal of what is needed to improve performance is articulated. So we're thinking about specific tasks are invented to overcome these weaknesses, and performance is monitored to provide cues for ways to improve it further. It's very, very structured and it's incredibly granular, and it's actually built into the model for intensive training and practice that you'll have talked about previously. So intensive training and practice is all about providing opportunities for more explicit, deliberate practice for trainees. And we're going to think about what that might look like in our context as we progress through. So you might want to stop here and think about, why are these three skills important as a mentor? Why have we chosen these three things to identify and articulate to you explicitly as part of your 6 skills development sessions? And the reason is we need to think about how our trainees learn. What are their motivators? How do they actually know what they need to do and what teachers do? Well, they don't. We need to show them. And modelling, scaffolding and deliberate practice are all ways that we could do that. It's also a basic principle of teaching, both in the primary classroom, the secondary classroom, or indeed the higher education classroom. If we think about the principles of constructive alignment, in order for our trainees to meet their learning outcomes, we must teach them to the learning outcomes. So in our context, we must show our trainees what is expected of them, and this applies to all aspects of their training curriculum, whether that's in the classroom or at university. They have to have opportunities to be shown what is expected of them and practice those skills before we then assess them. So let's take our first example. A trainee observes a teacher using a non-verbal cue, that could be raising a hand, to gain their pupil's attention, and then reflects on how this method effectively reduces noise without interrupting the flow of the lesson. Is this modelling, scaffolding, or deliberate practice? Well, this is an easy one. This is straightforward modelling. They observe it, they reflect on it, with the hope that they will then go on and do it. The next one's a bit more complicated, but you'll see where I'm going with this. So have a look at part 1. The mentor's demonstrating, the mentor's explaining, and the mentor models to the pupils in front of the trainee. Then there's some co-teaching together. And in that co-teaching session, the trainee has an opportunity to practice what it is they have seen demonstrated by their mentor. The mentor also provides feedback on what the trainee practices, with opportunities for enhancement. What do we think? Is that modelling, scaffolding, or deliberate practice. This is scaffolding. This is breaking down a fairly straightforward task into component parts. And we can see how these things are related and are building up over time. So they start by modelling and then they're adding in that practice, because scaffolding is not just about the support itself. It's not just about what the mentor or the teacher did in this context. It's useful in order to gradually build their skills up by providing the right level of support at different stages of their development. And that's the nuance of scaffolding that often gets missed. So it's not just about the support structures that we put in. It's about when we put them in, how we use it to break down what's expected, and when we take them away. So this example is a little bit more complex, so no prizes for guessing which one it involves. Work through these three parts now and see how the expertise is built up. We're focusing here on deliberate practice because it involves focused, repetitive practice with specific goals, immediate feedback, and opportunities for refinement. If you look at part 2, you can see that a micro-teaching session is used here as an approximation, but an alternative to micro-teaching could be simulation. These are all examples of approximation. What other examples of approximation can you think of? These are really important because we're taking out the real life practice because we're working at that granular level. Keep reading this through till you get to the end of part 4 and then we'll move on. So yes, this is deliberate practice because we're still moving through the confidence of our trainees to get them to an independent level. That's the goal of deliberate practice, but what it does is it takes them out of the real life situation to give them an opportunity to practice deliberately what it is they need to be able to do before they then have the opportunity to work independently on it. Modelling, scaffolding, and deliberate practice are 3 skill sets that you're going to need to be very, very familiar with as a mentor and as a lead mentor. They're 3 ways of teaching with our trainees that are highly powerful, and deliberate practice is actually quite complicated. So let's dig into it a little bit deeper. Okay, so we've got our usual infographic here breaking down our skills development session into 3 parts, but instead of a 1, 2, 3 in a kind of chronological order, now we're thinking about an A, B, C. You might use different strategies at different times. So in terms of modelling, what are the things that we're thinking about? Well, you're going to demonstrate the skill you want to see. It's that simple. Don't let people bamboozle you and tell you it's not. You do this all the time. You're going to demonstrate. But you really need to build in those opportunities for reflection. So as well as demonstrating, you're going to articulate the steps that you've taken, and then you're going to provide an opportunity for questioning. So narrating the story of what you're doing is hugely powerful for trainees because they can't do that yet for themselves. And then you need to provide an opportunity, and we'll do that with you, for deep reflection and re-articulation of what has been observed. Tell me what I did here. Why do you think it was effective? Is a really easy cue that we can give to trainees to help them on their journey to reflection when we're thinking about that first level of modelling. Okay, let's think about scaffolding. So remember, it's not just the supports that you're putting in, it's how you're breaking down the steps. So you've got to still demonstrate the skill through direct instruction. So you're still going to model, you're just going to build other things around that modelling as part of the scaffolding. An opportunity then for guided practice with feedback throughout. So doing things together as the mentor and the trainee can work really well here. That then might move on, or alternatively, you could do collaborative practice. So this idea that peers provide support, and that is hugely powerful. And again, that's another form of scaffolding because we're breaking it down through that social constructivist lens so that trainees have the opportunities to learn from each other as well as the more knowledgeable other, i.e. you. And then we want to move them towards independent practice. So we're still having the goal that we want to get them to work independently. And again, we're still providing opportunities for reflection. So think about that as you're preparing opportunities for scaffolding. Think about how you're breaking it down. Is that peer practice? Is that guided practice? Where's the feedback? Where's the reflection? Alternatively, you might be expected, or you might think it's beneficial to use deliberate practice. And this is going to be a really important one for us in terms of bridging that gap between university and their school experience, whether that be on placement or through intensive training and practice. So that's a really detailed program of very granular tasks. So we're picking up something that's very specific here, and we're building it up through layers. And the first thing is to identify that target area or that goal. Then we're going to be thinking about practicing it through micro teaching or simulation or alternative approximations. Immediate feedback, we want them to know instinctively through what we tell them whether that's been effective or not and why. And then they're going to have that opportunity to reflect on it whilst they're still in that approximation stage. Repetition and refinement, do it again, do it again, do it again, always with those opportunities for feedback and reflection. Then they're going to review their performance against their target. How are they progressing? Are they making the expected progress? Before they then apply it in context. And that's really important for us. Again, particularly thinking about those very granular areas of deliberate practice that are built into intensive training and practice as part of their school experience. So there are 3 distinct areas that we can be using here in terms of strategies for helping our trainees to learn what we need them to learn. We can use modelling, we can use scaffolding, we can use deliberate practice, we can use a combination of the 3 depending on the context and the circumstances. So some references and further reading for you there. There's a really great article on the Ambition Institute website written by Steve Farden, which is all about deliberate practice. So I would really encourage you to read that one at the end. And we'll be back for the final skills development session in a few weeks. Thanks very much.